In this slightly alternative video, I wanted to touch on a subject that's been bothering me quite a lot, particularly because when you talk about masculinity and maybe the association of politics to masculinity, young men, particularly Faustian men, what that means from a practical standpoint. It's nice to obviously wax lyrical metaphysically on this subject. I can talk at depth on the morphology and the Faustian man's need for infinite will to power and the derivations thereof and the corollaries, etc. But I think it's also good to make sure that we're attuned to the practicalities of any vision, of any meaningful metaphysical lived life, is to say, what does being a Faustian man today actually look like? It's not enough to be one's idolization of what a knight would be or a Viking would be, but actually in 2025, what does that mean from a practical lived standpoint? So for me, I think it's important that we address probably what is the crux of a lot of young men. So this is particular, I would say, the age range of men when they're 16 to maybe 24. This age range is very critical for a lot of development. Males tend not to develop prefrontal cortex, their brains, maturity-wise, until they're about 25, 26. So you have a lot of these porous minds being filled with a bunch of opinions, like mine, with a way to suggest how to live life, how to experience things, thinking thoughts in certain ways which will achieve certain outcomes. And obviously because you're quite impressionable when you're young, it is easy to see, say, something you think of as successful, someone who is successful, and then try to imitate them in that way. That means that you're probably going to see the same sort of success, or at least attain the same outcomes. This is particularly strong with the physical realm. So I played a lot of sports growing up, and that translated into training, and training for sports in particular, because to me it was always a unquestioning one causes the other. So it's this causality of if you train, you get stronger, and if you're stronger, you're a better athlete. It was a very natural consequence of basically my mindset growing up, that the gym was the off days or the alternative training scene scenario to the sporting one. So if you're playing sports on a Tuesday, on a Thursday, on a weekend, then on the alternate days you're in the gym, because that preparation leans and amplifies the other thing, performance-wise especially. And now this consequence obviously was less unique. It was something that was actually quite difficult to obtain knowledge on when I was growing up in the early 2000s, because the internet was much more piecemeal and fractious, and there wasn't a single source of correct information, and there wasn't YouTube in the way that it is today in terms of being able to assess and analyze, and you have a lot more empiricism, at least peer review, where we didn't have that back in my day. So in general, it led to a lot of different interesting techniques and knowledge sharing, particularly on forums, things like that. But what's been lost, and maybe this is particularly in the last 50 years of exercise, but probably all the way back in the inception of bodybuilding. Now, bodybuilding in particular, to me, is extremely not only homoerotic, but also deleterious or a denigrating force in the realm of physical fitness. Bodybuilding and bodybuilders have what is basically the feminized version of a masculine ideal. So bodybuilding is for, and particularly attracts, I would say, a lot of mentally ill men, because the way that you can assume that muscles or a certain physique transposes on you confidence. It gives you the ability to say, no, actually, I'm winning, I'm beating my battles, it is me. This is obviously why I'm the singlet on today, so I can implore you to look like me, is that you have this idea that bodybuilding is something that a man would do because the men who look like men bodybuild. Obviously abstracting away from when we see in magazines when we're 14, 15, what looks realistic, and not knowing anything about performance-enhancing drugs and steroids, things like that. So you have this idea that men with big muscles, ergo very manly men, ergo the epitome of what I want to achieve. And you look at Conan the Barbarian and all those comics, or you look at even historical pictures of, say, knights and Thor, Odin. They're always fairly muscular and athletic, and there's the V-taper. There's physique which carries across the morphological requirements of being a hero, and this is undisputed. And I think in terms of whether it's good, or at least it's morally virtuous to a very strong degree, Nietzsche and almost all power philosophers, vital philosophers, Ludwig Klages, epitomize what is this idea of a physical, spiritual valence, where you go into this synergistic effect of having the mind and the soul and spirit all intertwined and come out more fruitful and bountiful because you're training them all, or you're embracing them all in the same certain way that one builds the other up. So reading and writing is just as much for your physique as hitting the gym or exercise or playing a sport is for your mind and your soul and your body. They're cathartic, but they're also, as I say, intertwined in that way. There is this synergistic effect. So this is the spiritual position I think you take is, I want to be a warrior. A warrior looks like this. It gets in form, and the warrior trains because they don't know when battle will be. So you have to always be in form. But bodybuilding, and this is the problem with bodybuilding, it's not one particular element. It's all of the, you could say, picture the pie of bodybuilding from a factorial or parameters goes into why it's a feminized version of a masculine endeavor. So if we take just the idea of why would you be training? Most people, when they join a gym, have a goal. Usually it's fitness. Now, fitness is both gender neutral, or like not feminine, not masculine necessarily. Fitness is a humanistic ideal almost around, I would rather be fitter than unfitter. And so we can understand that fitter being better, as it's got aesthetic or moral criteria to it, in which we can elicit a good response. So maybe you get dopamine, maybe you get whatever, endorphins, things like this. But in general, we feel as if that being fit is better than not being fit. And society responds in the same way. It rewards us in several ways, but we also reward ourselves for being fit. It just feels good, and I can be trusted to tell you that. But the idea that we go into fitness with a methodology is where it breaks down between why I'm choosing to do what. Now, bodybuilding abstracts the fitness part almost away from the idea of weight training or hitting the gym. It's to say, you go in with this goal, I'm going to build my bicep 1 centimeter larger. I'm going to make sure this symmetry exists in my left and right arse cheeks. This is the feminized mentality of how you take what is a masculine affair of let me get as big and scary as possible, let me become a ferocious avatar of destruction, into how do I get my forearm, my bicep to be a little bit bigger here so it matches? I mean, this is you can see how this neuroticism fuels the femininity of the idea that lifting is a masculine pursuit when you start to diagnose partial elements of it to a way that you can hopefully manage and make sure that it's all even. Now, what I've done here is I've just contrasted maybe the two distinct differences here. You have bodybuilders with their, you could say, superficiality of masculinity on one side, and then you have maybe men of athletic pursuits who happen to have big muscles. And the crossover here in the middle, encapsulated probably perfectly by something like stage wrestling, like WWF, where they go on stage and they throw each other around very athletically, performatively, but also with the idea that they look like really big, masculine, muscled men with tans and what have you. Now, as I said, the difference in going into the gym here is performance-based versus big muscles-based. I go into the gym because I want to perform at a certain level. I want to be able to be as strong as possible. I want to bench 200 kilograms. I want to be able to pick up 300 kilograms, 350 kilograms from the floor. This is just the metric, the quantitative assessment of me being more athletic, me being fitter. I don't necessarily think as if, if I don't hit 350 deadlift this year, I'll have failed. But it's much more a benchmark for my overall performance. How do you measure yourself? And in particular, when it comes to certain metrics, it's nice to be able to just have that idea that I am progressing. Whereas bodybuilders obviously do ridiculous amounts of reps and sets on ridiculous exercises that make you look like a clown. And this is seen as normal. So you go onto YouTube and go, bodybuilding exercises for shoulders, and there'll be 17 variations of how the striation effect of whether it's concentric or eccentric and the angle of the movement does this. I mean, it's not only autistically pathetic and as I said, for losers, but it's so feminized that you've tried to make what is, I should say, a masculine pursuit of just action, of visceral doing, into an analytical, thinking pursuit, and which to me is a little bit like cowardice. It's like, how do I optimize without having to feel the pain and the struggle? How do I make sure that what I'm doing isn't such a waste of time? It's like, no, I can justify this being very easy and maybe doing a little push downs because it helps with the tricep and the head here. I mean, all of this stuff is as I said before, for very weak, unsocialized losers. So, and this is just the lifting part. This is not to say that the bodybuilding, which becomes a lifestyle, you see it on influencers on certain social media platforms, Instagram, TikTok, things like this. It goes into dieting and eating. So, and this is why I like the demonstrable effect here of just what's the reaction I have when I see certain people. So the men on the right eat to eat. It's because you need fuel, because you need energy, and you eat what you want to eat when you want to eat it. You know that they do by the way that they are and they look. And this is Tom Haviland, this is Brock Lesnar, and this is Boogs, famous YouTuber. And in particular, it's like, okay, would they drink alcohol or not? Would they do this or that? Which are always, as you said, like feminized, socializing questions. Do I have permission to do this thing? That's what you're doing. You're asking Daddy Internet or whatever social media platform or whoever it may be, can I do this or that to achieve my goal? Who cares? Do what you want. Because the idea that you need permission for anything in your life is always going to be the slave mentality. You want to be the ubermensch, you want to be the master, you have to just do the things you want to do. Now, I'm not saying you have to be suboptimal and start smacking heroin into your arm, because that's not going to be conducive to gains. But at the same time, if you're thinking about performance, then you can think, okay, well, maybe I shouldn't be splurging on 15 milkshakes for lunch and actually have a burger and whatever. But if you're going, I've got to count exactly how many fries I'm allowed to eat, and the bun has to be a grass lettuce-based derivative so that I don't meet my calorie restrictions on the beef and the cheese. I mean, come on. Once again, we're going into this completely and utter despairing circle of patheticness. So eating and dieting, I mean, you can see it here. Like, bodybuilders have probably the most autistic, pathetic, and embarrassing ways of eating, consuming foods. They go to such an autistic effect to count calories and macros and all of this nonsense that rather than being a bit more intuitive and say like, yes, I just want protein in every dish. No, I don't want to eat your soyified, high density seed oil consumed processed foods. Well, what I'll do is actually just eat normal foods like a normal human would have 100, 150 years ago. Is that beef and cheese and bread? Yes, probably. Is there a few carrots or whatever left over? Yes, let's slam those into it. Yes, I can have a tea or a coffee or a milkshake afterwards, and those things are fine. This is why Ray Peat is obviously much more effective at, or the PEDs in general. It's like, is this peating? Probably. Let's just go with it. As long as I'm not poisoning myself to that degree, who literally cares? Bodybuilders, obviously, much worse for this. If you have to download an application to tell you what you eat, you need to just remove yourself from society. Living and parading. So the third point I had here is on how life is lived versus what the goal is about your fitness journey. As I said before, I like fitness to think of it replicating what is training for a night or for a sport, if you particularly have that in mind. How do you get better and more adept and say physically a bit of a specimen, a bit of phenom here, and you come into your team or your sport or your life in a way that's blowing people out of the water. You say, oh my God, that guy's a physical beast, right? Versus the bodybuilder who's trying to get on stage so that other men can judge his appearance. Does one of these sound very, very feminine to you? Because if it does, and obviously the way I'm applying it certainly is bodybuilding, then that's probably not the masculine identity you want to be embracing. Do you want to go on stage greased up and tanned up to have other men give you a score in your jocks or your undergarments? Do you think that your ancestors would be proud of you for showing off your package next to 10 other men who are also oiled up and muscular showing off their packages? Does this seem like something you would want to brag about to your ancestors, to your kids? Or does this seem like a very autistic affair where we're trying to judge aesthetically a body in its most abstracted way out of what actually looks like a human body for some bizarre reason? Are these the two options you have? Probably yes, and probably you should just skip the homoerotic version and pick the normal version. No women like this, and some young men definitely get into lifting to attract women. This is, first of all, the wrong mentality to have. Women both care and don't care about muscles in ways you'll never understand, and I can explain it. But in general, this is not the way. And the women that would be attracted to you if you look like these two dickheads here, is not a woman I don't think you want anything to do with, because the mental illness required to think that that looks good from a female perspective is attributed just as readily to someone who will not be suitable as, say, like a mother or a partner at all. So it's this once again, living versus parading. Am I living into my physique as a vessel, as the carrier of my soul, my physiognomic body, or am I parading myself around like a lingerie model? You get to pick one. So you pick one. The last one is, I think, and maybe it's a more touchy subject, which is performance-enhancing drugs. So steroids, PEDs, all of this is a hot topic of discussion. I think, in particular, there's been a surfeit of information over the last decade where people are much more knowledgeable. And if you want to know something about PEDs, it's much easier to get that information. And I do believe this is a good thing. More education around these topics is obviously better. There's a lot of history and legacy of, you could say, uneducated or ignorant people going into taking drugs because it's what their mate recommended, or it's something that they feel as if they can control, and therefore they want to see results sooner rather than later. I myself have never done steroids because, once again, cheating yourself is cheating your body and soul and mind, but you're also taking on a Faustian bargain where you will have to pay a price. A lot of the time that's death, and early death, and you'll say, yes, but a candle burning at both ends generates more fire, or the star or the comet which burns the brightest fades out the soonest. Yeah, except no one who's a bodybuilder has ever really made an impact on the world or done anything like that. So what you're really saying is you just want results quicker and cheaper, and the cost is something you'll bear later. Most of them are dead now, who don't have time to regret it. And I think in general, it's pretty pathetic to want to just get big at the cost of your own life, shortening it and enlarging your heart and your other things. But it's also a bit of a pain in the ass, is it not? Having to have drugs ready, inject yourself, being across exactly your hormone profile, blood, lipid levels, all of these things just become mental strain. And I don't know anyone in my real life, or in reality, who's actually been better off for having taken drugs. Maybe TRT, so if you're on testosterone replacement therapy, if you have some significant genetic disease or you had cancer or something like that, it definitely is the case where I think it's a benefit and you should be doing it. But that's under the protocol of a doctor, and there's a certain level of control and quality there. And you should also be combining it with, as I said, for fitness in general. And all three of these guys here are definitely on performance-enhancing drugs in some fashion, but they do it in a way that I think is actually, if not noble, then it's at least understandably in the spirit of, as I said before, the masculine endeavor. It's, can I push myself to the limit? And what does the limit look like? The limit doesn't look like my stretched skin underneath writhing snakes oiled up with whatever kind of delusional impact you think you are having on someone's gaze. It's much more around, okay, am I a physical specimen here? Am I a juggernaut? Yes, I am. Let's go, baby. And then you're pushing heavy ass weights. Now, the idea here, I mean, this loser was in Will Tennyson, absolutely gaunt looking, pathetic weasel of a man with muscles. I mean, you can see that there's an unhealthy look to this. You're getting such a low body fat percentage by virtue of eating no calories, more or less. It's just like the bare essential calories for no reason. Literally undue stress on your body for what? So that other men might compliment you on Instagram, on social media? Come on, guys. Let's be real with ourselves, huh? This is an extremely mentally ill endeavor that you're choosing to be a part of. Or if for any reason you see yourself drifting over to this side of things, you can look good without doing the mentally ill feminine things. This is not a binary choice here around, to be big I have to be a bodybuilder. They're by far, in a way, the most, if it's for women, attractive men are men who do something. This is to say, women are attracted to men who are purposeful, who have this idea of themselves as something above and beyond their own physical being. And this is always men with journeys, with destinies, with the idea that there's a limit to be pushed, and if they can do it, then they achieve this status, versus an autistic affair around engineering what is a quality outcome on a certain spectrum of, is my arm big enough? Is my arm shredded enough? I mean, this is nonsensical ridiculously. So I think to summarize here on this diatribe that I've been unloading onto you for 20 minutes, if you've made it this far, hopefully I've kept you around the bare arms doing their job in terms of sexifying my video here. But it is to say that there's a a soul and a soulless process of almost any type of endeavor. Is to say, once you start to abstract out of what is a very natural, you say organic and cosmogonic affair, this is that Ludwig Klages style of understanding the soul and the spirit as this intertwinable and intuitive, I am part of nature as much as nature is a part of me, to the science first, empirical blah, blah, blah from these roid heads, is how you get to this idea that there's a destitution of the spirit of the soul and these men dying is because naturally, yes, they're decaying their bodies artificially, but they're also signing this death warrant, this Faustian pact, and it's really just not worth it. They look horrible, like honestly and truly. This looks like a disgusting pig who's started to walk on hind legs. So, last thing, please be physically fit, be a beast, be a phenom, be that absolute essential weapon that you can be, but do it in a way that's at least life affirming, but definitely the way that the Faustian gods intended.